Classical forms. Instrumental compositions of the classical period usually consist of several movements that contrast in tempo and character. There are often 4 movements, and they're arranged as follows. The first one is fast, the second one is slow, the third one is a dance-related movement, and the fourth one is a fast movement. Classical symphonies and string quartets usually follow this 4-movement pattern, whereas classical sonatas may consist of 2, 3, or 4 movements. A symphony is written for orchestra. A string quartet is for 2 violins, viola, and cello, and a sonata for 1 or 2 instruments. These, orchestra, string quartet, and sonata, are covered later in this chapter. In writing an individual movement of a symphony, string quartet, or sonata, a classical composer could choose from several different forms. One movement of a composition might be in ABA form, whereas another might be in theme and variations. Classical movements often contrast themes vividly. A movement may contain 2, 3, or even 4 or more themes of different character. Composer, patron, and public in the classical period. Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven, 3 of the world's greatest composers, worked during a period of violent political and social upheaval. Like everyone else, musicians were strongly affected by changes in society, and in the careers of the 3 classical masters, we can trace the slow emancipation of the composer. First came Joseph Haydn, known as Franz Joseph Haydn, 1732 to 1809, who was content to spend most of his life serving a wealthy aristocratic family. His contract of employment in 1761 shows that he was considered a skilled servant, like a gardener or gamekeeper. He had to wear a uniform and compose such music as His Highness shall order. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, 1756 to 1791, born just 24 years later, could not bear being treated as a servant. He broke from his court position and went to Vienna to try his luck as a freelance musician. For several years he was very successful, but then his popularity declined and he died in debt. Ludwig van Beethoven, 1770 to 1827, fared better than Mozart. Only a few years after Mozart's death, Beethoven was able to work as an independent musician in Vienna. His success was gained through a wider middle-class market for music and a commanding personality that prompted the nobility to give him gifts and treat him as an equal. As the 18th century advanced, more people made more money. Merchants, doctors, and government officials could afford larger homes, finer clothes, and better food. But the prospering middle class wanted more than material goods. It also sought aristocratic luxuries such as theater, literature, and music. In fact, during the classical period, the middle class had a great influence on music. Because palace concerts were usually closed to them, townspeople organized public concerts where, for a price of admission, they could hear the latest symphonies and concertos. During the second half of the 18th century, public concerts mushroomed throughout Europe. In London, a concert series ran from 1765 to 1781, co-directed by one of Bach's sons. In Paris, around the same time, a concert organization assembled a large orchestra conducted during the 1770s by a black composer and violinist who was a championship fencer as well. Vienna. Vienna was one of the music centers of Europe during the classical period, and Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven were all active there. A population of 250,000 in 1800 made Vienna the 4th largest city in Europe. All 3 classical masters were born elsewhere, but were drawn to Vienna to study and to seek recognition. In Vienna, Haydn and Mozart became close friends and influenced each other's music. Beethoven traveled to Vienna at 16 to play for Mozart. At 22, he returned to study with Haydn. You could say that Haydn influenced and or taught both Mozart and Beethoven.